Hey, Crawl Spacers, welcome to a special episode. And we're celebrating Spider-Man's co-creator, and we're joined by the family. We have Mark Ditko. Let's welcome Mark. Hey, Mark, how are you doing, man? So nice to meet you.
Yeah, good to be here.
And Mark is Steve Ditko's nephew, and I'm carrying on the tradition. So glad to have you on the show, Mark. It's an honor. And we're also joined on this episode by Matt Lamb. There is Matt right there. Now, Matt is the creative director of Bottle Works in Johnstown. Is that how I say it? Johnstown?
Johnstown, yep.
Johnstown, Pennsylvania.
Johnstown.
Which was Steve Ditko's hometown. And these two fellas are putting together an exhibit called Hometown Heroes, the Steve Ditko exhibit. So talk a bit about how this came about. Matt, I hear it was your idea, and you got in touch with Mark. Is that how it happened?
Yeah, that was the first contact between me and the family. I reached out to Mark and gave him my idea, and then we went from there. He put me in touch with his dad and brother, and the rest is history, I guess, is how you would say it.
Right.
And a whole lot of work.
Yeah. Now, Mark, is this
is
this like the first exhibit ever for Steve? With the family involved?
Yeah.
So talk a bit about the exhibit. Why did you guys want to put this together?
Well, because he deserves it.
Exactly.
I mean, he's artists tend to be backseat drivers sometimes in early days. Stan being the showman that he was. Everybody else just sort of paled, in comparison. They weren't out there. They had their nose to the grindstone, doing stories and artwork.
Right.
So, they just did, they deserve, Jack and Steve Ditko and those guys, they deserve a little shining.
I agree. And the name of the show, let me pull up this image, the Ditko inspired exhibit. So you're asking for artists, right, Matt, to submit stuff? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's the kind of our secondary exhibit. So we have 3 different exhibit spaces. So the Hometown Heroes exhibit will be Steve's work. And then this is a supplementary exhibit where we have a call to artists out, and we're asking them to show us their Ditko inspired work.
Oh, very cool.
He inspired just about everybody that came after him. So,
right.
We want to see some of it.
So this celebration starts July 15th. So in about a month is when it will be, they open the doors, and it'll go until September 11th. So a couple months of this exhibit. Is it going to, you said it's in multiple rooms. Talk about that. What's it going to look like?
We have a pretty big space. The reason that we're called the Bottle Works Art Center is that we took over a old bottling company. So we have basically abandoned warehouse spaces where our galleries exist now. So we've got a couple of big spaces to fill with art, and that's what we're going to do.
I actually have a picture of the exterior of your facility. Let me pull this up. I've got it right here. So there it is right there. There's a picture of it. It used to bottle soda. Is that what I read here? There's some of the old sodas right there.
And actually that building you're seeing is just one of the 2 buildings. That's the main building right there.
Okay. So what's going to be in here for the exhibit?
That's going to be the main exhibit, and then the inspired exhibit will be off to the side, kind of where those garage doors are at.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So Mark, was it a hard pitch to get involved with this, or was it an easy pitch? Something that you thought would be cool to do?
You know what? I've had a long-term relationship with my uncle, I guess, since I was born. So,
right.
And then obviously, even when I moved out, I maintained contact with him, and started to stick my nose in the comic industry, comic conventions and things. So for me, I got close enough to him to know that he had ambitions, things that he wanted to do, and when he passed away, he didn't accomplish some of those things. He left a whole lifetime of artwork and creativity behind him. And you know what? It just couldn't fade. I just couldn't let it fade.
Right. What can you share what some of his ambitions were? I mean, was it to have an exhibit like this, or what was something he didn't think he got accomplished?
Well, for him, it was more of a sort of a forward track of creativity and expanding his, I guess, artistic activities. So around 2005, 2006, we started to write back and forth about things that he wanted to do in the industry, kind of beyond just sort of the comic side. So I have a friend here in Los Angeles who runs a post-production studio, and Emmy Award-winning, Academy Award-winning, worked with James Cameron and on his post-production. So he had connections with a lot of people. Yeah. And I wrote my uncle about that, and I said, hey, Uncle Steve, I have this connection. Do you want to leverage it? Is there something that you want to do? So we wrote back and forth for a while about things that he wanted to do, characters that he owned, that he wanted on the big screen, characters that he wanted in animation series, things that he said, oh, I think this would be great for girls. I think this has a lot of potential for this and that. So, and then he was, sending me certain specific comics that he thought were good storyboards for some of these things. And he said, I don't think this character would be good here or there. So we wrote back and forth with those kind of things. And he told me that I guess him and maybe Robin Snyder was involved, where they had pitched some things to the Hollywood scene, but it never really took hold. Right. So I don't know. I'm a go-getter, man. I want to make stuff happen. Yeah. So those things, and I hate it because this is I don't have many regrets because I'm just like a jamming kind of guy. Mm-hmm. But I ended up dropping the ball on a lot of this activity because I run my own business. Right. And it just I dropped the ball. Let's just say that. So you know what? To me, it's never too late. I want to pick the balls back up and get them going. Right. And one of the first steps, getting the game going again, is the exhibit. So let me pull up this. I've got another picture of the events that are going on. So Matt, talk a bit about this. The exhibit starts, like we said, July 15th, and also the Inspired exhibit. Talk a bit about this rundown. Let's go through this a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of great things happening, obviously. Now, that private opening event you'll see says invite only. So that's going to be the opening where the Ditko family and friends and probably some industry folk who have reached out are able to enjoy the exhibit and have a little reception without maybe getting mauled by the fans that may be coming through. But we didn't want to leave the fans out that weekend either. So Lenny Schwartz, the writer of the Ditko play, agreed to allow us to put on a performance the very next day on July 25th at the Historic State Theater in Johnstown, which is a really cool place built in 1928. It's about to start undergoing renovations, but it's basically original as of right now from 1928. Right. So really cool space. And Lenny's actually going to come down for the play and do a little introduction for us as well. So that's going to be awesome. Right.
The play, I've got you've got it behind you, and here's another image of it. This is just like a movie poster for or a play.
Yeah, and quick shout out there to the artist. He had done that for Lenny at the start of the play originally, and agreed to not only let us use it, but he updated it for us at no charge. I mean, just a great asset. Yeah, obviously a huge Ditko fan. So
yeah, you can see Spider-Man a little bit back here. Look at that. Yep, very cool. Very
cool. I just got to inject something here that before he kind of continues through the rundown. So Lenny reached out to me when he had done this, and he was about ready to do the first show, and he said, "Hey, Lenny, I did this Ditko play. Would you be interested in reading it or attending?" I can't remember how the initial correspondence goes. So I was like, "Dude, send it to me, man. I want to read it." So he sent it to me, and I'll tell you what, it was really hard. And if Lenny's listening, or eventually he'll kind of get around this, he knows what the correspondence was like. But man, I consider myself the Steve Ditko philosophical monitor. I gotta make sure to keep everything sort of aligned with my uncle's philosophy. So I read this thing and I'm like, oh my freaking God. Like, he can't say that. He can't, oh my God, that's so wrong. And he's in the whole thing, after, and I'm making comments, I'm just like, no, dude, you can't say that. You got to say this and really rewriting stuff. And then eventually I kind of got what he was doing and the story that he was really trying to portray. Right. And I kind of throttled off on that. I have my share of comments on there. He was pretty appreciative of that. And he said he couldn't integrate him into the first show, but he ended up putting him into the subsequent shows when he did it in New York. But when I first read it, I was like, oh my God, no, you can't do that. Yeah. But it's a fun thing, from a fun, playful perspective of the early times. It's a good show.
Yeah. We've got a comment. Bruce has seen the play and read the script and watched a bit on YouTube. He says it's awesome. And Bruce is a member of our staff, and he's in Johnstown, and he's gonna do like a live stream with his phone and give us a live showing of the exhibit, what it looks like for the viewers that can't hook a plane ticket up to go to Pennsylvania. Cool. So Bruce, thank you for doing that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So you could continue with the agenda.
Yeah,
there.
No problem. I love one of the first. Well, Bruce says hello to all of us. Thank you, Bruce. And I love this comment. We have 3 levels of hair evolution going on.
He's not wrong.
No, I know. But this is I'm obviously after. Holy cow, man!
Mark wins. Yeah.
It just does this. I let it go. I don't. Yeah.
It just does this. No, I do. I do shave it off. But anyway,
people ask me why do I do this? I said because I can.
Exactly.
There you go, yeah.
Guys your age are envious of your follicles, sir. Matt says, hello, everybody. I hope that this interview is going deep into the Ditko family tree of what Mark knows of his Uncle Steve. Yes, we're going to go talk about the exhibit, and we're going to ask some questions, too. And you guys, if you have questions, feel free. I'll pop them up throughout the broadcast. Let me go back to the exhibit. We were going down the rundown. We stopped on the play. Where was the play in here?
It's like the fourth item down there.
Yeah, there we go. So public opening July 30th is when.
Yeah,
when
and
open it to the public.
The exhibit will obviously be open to the public prior to that, but that weekend we are just going to have a big old party.
That's awesome.
We're going to have a lot of artists demonstrating. There's going to be sidewalk painting going on. There's going to be mural painting going on. There's going to be live music all weekend, and it's all going to be celebrating Steve Ditko.
That's very cool. And you're also going to play the Doctor Strange movie for Family Fun Night.
Yep.
That looks very cool.
We do like a quarterly family fun night where we just allow families to come down for free of charge, and kids get to do crafts. So this time around it'll be some Spidey and Doctor Strange crafts that we're working on, and
nice.
They'll get to watch Doctor Strange on our 40-foot inflatable screen on our festival lawn. So
nice.
That'll be fun.
You guys aren't having to blow that up by yourselves. You got an air pump, don't you? Because those things are huge.
It's automatic.
There you go. The No Tie Gala, August 14th. You've got. Is that where they just look at the art?
Yeah, and that's just the BottleWorks annual fundraising gala. But obviously, it's going to be huge with the Ditko exhibits on the wall. For the gala. So.
And you're throwing a block party in September, huh?
Yeah, Ethnic Fest is kind of a Johnstown tradition, taking different forms over the year, but it always happens right in the heart of Cambria City, which is where we're located, and so we take part in it. So again, since we geared all this while the Ditko exhibit was happening, we're gonna make it all incorporated into that. So.
And then you wrap it up with a mini convention. It looks like.
Yes, the Ditko Mini Con.
There you go.
Yeah, we've got some exciting stuff happening there. We've had some industry leaders reach out. Mark and other Ditko family will be in attendance. We've got Carl Potts coming to do a visual storytelling lecture series. It's going to be really
very nice,
really special.
Very cool. And also, just look up your Facebook page. Search for BottleWorks on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you guys are been putting out announcements on all 3 of those. So, and I've been sharing them on the crawl space too.
I've seen that. Thank you.
Yeah, and you'll probably announce some comic celebrities, I imagine, the closer we get there, won't you? I don't know if you want to announce any now, but I imagine a lot of well-known people want to be involved with this.
Yeah, we've had quite a few reaching out, so we're putting a pretty cool lineup together.
Very cool. All right. So again, check that out over the next couple months. So let's learn more about your relationship, Mark, with your uncle. Talk about that. I'm 46. How do you mind if I ask your age, Mark?
I was born in 59. I could tell you that.
Okay, there.
Whatever that means.
So you were just a little kid when Spider-Man was coming out. I mean, what was your first? When did you realize my uncle is drawing one of the coolest superheroes of all time?
I probably didn't realize that until I was probably an early teen or mid-teen, because it wasn't something that we talked about in the family. You know, my Uncle Steve was a guy who flipped burgers on the barbecue when we had cookouts. You know, it wasn't something we did. But from an early time, the one thing that I did know that he was a good artist, because my older brother, 2 years older than me, kind of followed the artistic path. Although we all grew up in art, we all drew. All the kids, we drew inks, you know, pastels, paint, you know, color, you know, whatever, black and whites. We all grew up in an artistic family.
It's in the genetic code.
Yeah, I mean, my dad's an artist. You know, he's an architect, but by trade, but you know, he's an artist. You know, it's we all kind of were in that environment. But I remember it probably started when I was, I don't know, 4 or 5 or whatever. There were always comics around the house.
Okay.
Always. I have no idea where they came from. They just appeared. You know, I don't know. And honestly, I don't know if my dad was getting them from my uncle, or and I probably should talk to him sometime. Where did those things come from? But we were reading them. But the first ones that I read were Conga. That's kind of what I got started on, was Conga. And so then because of that, I kind of fell in love with, as a kid, gorillas. So one time my uncle was there, and I think he was showing my older brother something. My older brother would draw something, and my uncle would throw a piece of tracing paper over it and say, here, take a look at this and do that. And then I said, hey, Uncle Steve, can you draw me a gorilla? And then he just whipped out his gorilla. Well, of course, he's drawing Conga, you know, but I never put it together. I mean, as a kid, we didn't read who the artist was or who the writer. So every time I'd see him, I'd ask him, can you draw me a gorilla? Draw me another gorilla. So you know, for me, I started out reading his comics, not knowing they were his, and having him draw stuff for me, not realizing that he was actually drawing what I was reading. So that was kind of my earlier, you know, my earliest sort of introduction to him as an artist. Right. But I didn't know that he did that for a profession. When did you put it together? It co-created Spider-Man. Spider-Man really took off. I mean, with that 67 cartoon, after that, he was everywhere. Yeah, I really don't think it was until I was probably 13 or 14, which would have been mid 70s. No, somewhere around early 70s. And he'd been off the book for like a decade by that point. Yeah. Yeah. I never realized, because like I said, the family, it wasn't something that, he was just our uncle. And it wasn't something that, you know, when we all got together, we talked about what he was doing. We talked about family stuff. He's teaching me how to throw an axe, you know, and a knife, you know, and stick it in the tree. And, you know, we were doing like uncle stuff. Yeah. So it wasn't something that it was even chatter in the family. And by the 70s, when you realized he created one of the biggest characters of all time, did you ask him about it, or did he just not want to talk about it? You know what? I don't remember talking to him about it as a kid, because at that point he would come in to Johnstown, you know, over the holidays of Christmas, and sometimes in the summer we would have, you know, gatherings. So he'd come in a couple times a year, and still as a kid, I'm not thinking that I'm going to ask him about that. It wasn't really until I started to write to him. I moved to Phoenix in 84. Then I moved to Los Angeles in 91. It wasn't until I started attending comic conventions in 91, early 90s, that when we started to write back and forth together, that I started to, you know, ask him more questions and talk to him more about comics. And from whatever I've seen, letters that he's written to people, etc., he really, like you were talking about, he was always thinking about the next gig, the next thing, the next. He didn't have a rear view mirror, I don't think, from what I've seen.
Is that true? Did he not?
No.
He didn't dwindle in the past.
You know what? I went through my letters and I pulled some little clips out of things that I wrote to him. And one thing, so in December of 91, we were writing back and forth, and he wrote me and he said, past achievements can be a trap if one believes he can live on what he did yesterday or last month, new yesterday, etc. Past achievements can become excess baggage. My favorite job or character is the next one I'm going to do. It helps keeps the interest, motivation, energy into what's possible. So that, you know what? He was the embodiment of that. People, I was on a panel with John Semper and Jackie Estrada and Matt Dunford, who does the Comic Fest down in San Diego. And I was on a panel and John was like, how can you walk away from that and not keep thinking about it? It's just, that was in his DNA, that's just the way he was wired. It's like he didn't care. He was on, what am I going to create now?
Right. And I like what you said in that letter. It can be a hindrance. Is that what you said? Or it can be, it could trap you and you be caught up in the past, like like you're drowning, I guess. And Spider-Man is a big wave. I mean, that could take you under.
Hey, think about those actors who get stereotyped and they're one role and you see them and it's like they can't get anything else and they're stuck in that. He really admired Captain Kirk, William Shatner, because he was so out there, always doing something else, doing more. He never had any limitations almost. He was always just out there for everything. So, he didn't want Michael. I mean, he didn't have that in him to, pigeonhole himself.
Do you think the Marvel job, the Spider-Man, the Doctor Strange, was just a job for him? Do you think it was just a gig?
You know what? There was somebody's post on Facebook that was kind of like that. And is it just a gig? You know what? Okay. Yes, but is this just an interview? Was your last one just an interview? No, you put your heart and soul into everything that you do. And he did. Did he just Doctor Strange, though, to me, that was a little different animal because that was his. He's the one created that and pitched that. So but I'll say all his characters, when he worked on them, he meant it. He was he was a pro.
Right. And like some jobs like I've had, you've liked some more than others. I imagine he liked Spider-Man, Doctor Strange more than other jobs that he's had.
Probably, I would say yes. And I can't really speak to that part. That starts to get kind of deep, but I know he liked working for Charlton Comics. He had a lot of freedom. He liked that freedom and flexibility. He did say that, there were some editors and some people he didn't like working for because he was too throttled. So he did like his freedom.
And you shared with me a couple pictures. Let's look at those real quick. There you are. Tell me, where was this taken?
That was, I think that was I was at my daughter's baptism in Johnstown.
Okay.
Yeah. It might have been my daughter's baptism in Johnstown.
Circa what year for that one, you think? Or decade?
Probably 92. That would have been probably 92 because she was born in 92. Stephanie, namesake Stephanie. So I think that was probably in 92.
That's awesome. We've got this one. Tell me about this picture.
I mean, that's us, with one of our Christmases, and when he'd come home and we all got football shirts, and we all had these, we were this team. And there's a whole series of these shots where we're doing all kinds of poses and kind of things. But that he was just one of us.
Which one are you? I think this is you.
That's me. Yeah.
Okay.
That's me.
I'm good. Okay.
Yeah.
So these are all the nephews and nieces around here?
No, that's, right next to me is my sister, Helena.
Okay.
And then with the trophy is my my little brother, Patrick.
Okay.
And then right next to her that's my sister, Joanna, my younger sister, Joanna. And next to her is my older brother, Steve.
Oh, very cool.
That's all my brothers and sisters.
And you shared this one. Who are these two?
Yeah, well, that's me. Me on the lower, shorter side, smaller one,
right here.
And that's my other. Yeah, and then my brother Steve. So that was at his place. That's where his mom. That's where he grew up, in that house.
Oh wow.
We were just playing around, and that was right around probably 63, 64.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And the date that's right when Spider-Man was coming out in the very beginning. That's so cool. What kind of man was he? Because I want to hear it from you and the family. What kind of man was he? I've heard everything from he was the Howard Hughes of comics. He wouldn't do interviews. He wouldn't talk to people. He was very introverted, wouldn't talk. What kind of man was he?
God. He was, I don't want to say he was a regular guy.
Yeah.
But that's what I saw. You know, anybody, and I'll tell you what, I think a lot of that chatter that you hear about how he was, it comes from people who didn't know him.
Yeah.
Because you talk to Mort Todd, you talk to, Craig Yo, you talk to any of the people who really knew him they would never say that. They know that that's not who he was.
Right.
You talk to Paul Levitz, those guys, they're going to say he was just an average, I'm going to say an average guy who had a lot of talent and he focused on his craft.
From what I have seen, he didn't like to talk about him, the man. He wanted his work to talk for him. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes, okay. But you got to understand something. And this is where I feel like I have I don't know, maybe I'm delusional and kind of making this shit up, but, but because I know I'm a Ditko and I see the family, I see my dad, I see the aunts and uncles, I see him through the lens of the family. Right. Although I got to say that he hated that label, that I'd say, oh, I'm a Ditko. And he'd go, what does that mean? That don't mean nothing. But it's true that there's a certain upbringing. There's a certain ethic, that you have when your parents, first generation immigrants, Johnstown. There's a book that Zach Cruz, in his book, Mysterious Traveler, Steve Ditko book, he mentions a book there about the immigrant attitudes of Johnstown, the early attitudes. And it's called With Bread, for Bread and With Butter, or something like that. But it's about the immigrant attitudes in Johnstown. And one of the things is they didn't put a high emphasis on education. That was like number 2. Number 1 was work ethic. Okay. And work. So the thing is my uncle had a very high, and it goes kind of with the family, a work ethic. And that's what he did, is he just had, such a love of what he did. He wasn't in a job they didn't like. So he just had a passion for that. And like I said, if you talk to people who knew him, that's what they would say that they saw. Right. We went out there to clean out his studio and his apartment, and we happened to go to the bank that he was at. And the teller, some of the people were coming in, and then the teller started to come in and say, hey, I just want to say we loved, Steve Ditko, and we had such a great day. He was such a great guy. He was always so lucid. We would have him sign things. We would never have to explain things to him. So they were talking to him as, sort of the human part of it. And that's when you get to know him, that's who he was.
And you're talking about cleaning out his apartment. Over your shoulder is, I've seen those on pictures. This was outside his door that said S. Ditko, that little metal sign.
His studio.
You've got it now. That's so cool.
Yeah.
You were talking about him going to the bank and going around town. I've always wondered, and I don't know if he ever talked about this, you can't leave the house without seeing Spider-Man somewhere. I have always wondered, did that make him happy or sad?
I don't know. I could just from us writing back and forth. I think it was something that he had, I guess the best way I could describe it is a neutral attitude. Like, hey, look, there's Spider-Man. Because when we were right back and forth, I would ask him questions about Spider-Man and Doctor Strange and, other characters, Mr. A and the Question. And I would ask him, so he never resisted it. He would just answer the question. So
Right.
it wasn't like he had some big, repulsor beam just pushing all that stuff away. I think for him, it was just easy to acknowledge the fact that, yeah, I did that. And now I'm doing this.
Right. I wondered if he was flipping the channels one time and a Spider-Man movie came on and he watched it. Did he ever talk about that? Did he see a Spider-Man movie?
I think he did see the first one. I thought I don't know. I never really asked him that.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, but I think I saw somewhere that someone else had written to him that had he seen that, and I thought he said that he did, but some of the later ones, he said no, I don't really have an interest in that, just because he knows that they were so altered, and and whatever. The only thing that ever really kind of got more airtime was the fact that he really didn't like his, tributes, in the movies weren't really becoming, he's the slum landlord, Mr. Ditkovich. I was seriously, it's like, so that some of that stuff, and you know what? It would tip me off probably. It was like, man, come on, I freaking helped create this thing, and look at you're making me a slum landlord. I mean, come on. So some of that stuff to me was justified.
Yeah, I agree.
But he was, I would just say, as a whole, he was kind of neutral. He was always a forward thinking and forward looking individual.
I just hoped he wasn't ticked off every time he saw Spider-Man. And man, I helped create it, but look what they did, or stuff like that. I just always have wondered that.
No, but what's funny too is where his apartment is. And then you just come out of his apartment and you just go down like a couple buildings and you cross the street. And then you go right next to his office building, because it's just a couple doors down where his studio was. There was a gift shop right in the corner. It's just all the whole windows are just full of all the Spidey and Marvel stuff like that. So we walk past it every single day.
His work has not been out of print. I mean, did Marvel? Did they send him comps, or did they? Do you know if they?
I think so, because then he would send them to me.
Oh,
because so some of the stuff like that purple Doctor Strange book, and so when we got to writing back and forth, sometimes he would then just send them to me. I don't think he was buying them.
No, yeah. Well, hopefully he was compensated for this. I mean, I would hope so. But you always hear the horror stories of the bankers would know that he went and visited all the time.
I think the one thing that you could say, he was never compensated for what he actually did.
Agreed.
Or contributed to.
Agreed. And I've got some more pictures of him. I think they went through the bullpen, and just because Steve is in, I've only seen a couple pictures of him. And I think this shot and that shot, he's wearing the same shirt. So I think it's all in the same day.
I think those were shot by Eric Stanton.
Okay.
When he was in the studio with Stanton.
Right. And what's weird is I've seen on eBay, someone goes to the Johnstown school and they're selling his yearbook. So this is like his yearbook picture. And someone says he looks very much like Peter Parker. I mean, I can see it. What do you guys think?
Okay. I mean, I'll throw in my 2 cents. So there were a couple books. One of them Craig Yo put out, and then it ended. The other book, Ditko Unleashed, that was the book that had was sort of I don't forget what they call it. The book that was put together after the exhibit that they did in Spain in 2016 or so. So in there's a bunch of pictures, a handful of pictures that they say are him, and I thought, okay, those don't look like him. And I talked to my dad and my mom, and they were like, they're not him. So what I did was I went through the 45 yearbook, and I picked out, I was trying to find out who these people really were. And all of those pictures came from the 44 yearbook, which there was no pictures of him in there. But the 45 yearbook, I went through every person there. And there are about 10 people that look just like Spider-Man or like Peter Parker. They all look the same. I have it. It's just like I have all these, like this lineup. It's like, funny. Who are these people? And they all look the same.
It's the slick back hair, the glasses.
All do, with round glasses.
All those dudes look like
10 people who went to school then that look like that.
Funny.
That's why Spidey's so relatable. We were all Spider-Man at some point.
Yeah.
We were all Peter Parker.
Well, except the hair, but yeah. Back,
I mean, no,
everyman.
Obviously he took inspiration from the things that he had in the past, the things that he was studying, things that were, modern, activity, the water towers that were in, New York City and stuff. So he took inspiration from everywhere. Was it intentional? Nah, I don't know. I couldn't say that.
Matt, I hate to keep you out of the conversation. Talk about your first love of Steve Ditko. When did you first discover him and fall in love with the art?
Oh man, I think I told you earlier. A picture just resurfaced of me at my 3rd birthday party in 1979, and I was wearing a Spider-Man T-shirt. I mean, it started that young. But as far as my actual knowledge of Ditko as a creator, I really got heavily into comics at probably age 10. And Spider-Man was one of those characters that I instantly fell in love with. Mm-hmm. And then, once I got so entrenched and started collecting, I started, learning about the history and learned about Steve Ditko, obviously, and then started following his career. Yeah. The interesting part for me, and part of why we're doing this exhibit, or why I wanted to do it anyway, is that I had no clue that he was from my hometown until I was in my 30s.
Man,
it's like it's not talked about, and that drives me insane. So like, we want to get the word out. We want everybody to know that he's from Johnstown, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean, and Spider-Man is so big. I mean, that would
Absolutely.
And the Convention and Visitors Bureau of Johnstown should hopefully they're behind you with this stuff.
I'm working on them. Yeah, I'm working on them. But the excitement is starting to bubble in Johnstown because just the stuff that we've announced, people are getting more and more aware, which is cool.
Right.
And I think about what it can do for young artists in our area to know that, hey, this guy that created Spider-Man, came from our area. So
my first exposure, and Matt, we were talking about this. We're both about the same age. My first exposure to Steve Ditko was Marvel Tales, where they reprinted the 60s stuff in the 80s. And I remember Marvel Tales 137, the issue number specifically. I was young and I didn't know that these were reprints. So I was buying them for 60 cents off the spinner rack. And I'm like, well, why is he just now getting bit by a spider? I've been reading before. How is this an old adaptation? What's going on? But then I finally put together that they're reprints. And I just fell in love with the new stuff and the original stuff, both of it coming out at the same time. It was the 80s was a good time to be a Spider-Man fan.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Brad, what did you think about the artwork? Because that's something that, to me, I get a lot of feedback about the artwork of the earlier ones versus the newer ones. You were reading or seeing the newer ones before the older ones.
Yeah.
Because Matt Dunford, thing that kind of sticks in my head is he grew up in a later generation. He said when he saw the earlier ones, he was like, what the heck? Like, what kind of artwork is that? I mean, what was your impression?
I loved it. I knew it was a different take, and art is subjective. And I loved both styles. Your uncle's style, I fell in love with it. It was from what I've read, Stan Lee and Steve didn't want a hero that looked like Superman. They didn't want a big bulky guy. They wanted a teenager. Most of those teenagers are sidekicks, and we didn't want a sidekick. So he needed to look a little scrawny. He needed those glasses, and your uncle did it perfectly. I mean, if he didn't do it perfectly, we wouldn't be talking right now.
Yeah.
So,
right.
I've got a couple.
I personally too think that Steve was a master storyteller.
Yes.
He wasn't one of those pinup artist guys, and at certain points in Spider-Man's career, that's what you've had on the books is guys that draw these big splashy images. It's not that Steve couldn't do that, but man, when you look at those original issues, the story is told without the words.
Yes.
Like, the story's there.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's always impressed me.
Now, talking about that point, Stan and Steve wanted to create a hero that was not so muscular, but the first issue was rejected and Kirby drew it, which is the one we know so much. We've seen this image so many times, but I think your uncle inked it, right? Is that correct?
I think so.
Yeah. So this was the original issue 1 that your uncle drew.
Yep.
And Steve turned it down, which I don't understand. I love this image too. Granted, it wasn't $7.99 back in 1962, but I just love this image. I don't know why it was turned down. Both images are great, but
in the book in Ditko Shrugged, there the author said that that the story is that the reason that that cover was turned down is because we're looking down at the hero, and Stan Lee didn't like that. He didn't like that we were looking down at the hero.
Yeah, Stan had his own image of what a hero or what especially a cover really probably needed to be like, and it just didn't fit that mold.
Yeah, we are looking up at the hero there, aren't we? Yeah. I wonder if he just changed the perspective. If that would have Stan would have liked. We'll never know. We'll never know.
Yeah.
But I've got a few. We can go through some more pictures, and this is the first issue. Just absolutely beautiful. Do you guys have favorite covers or images through the years?
Yeah, it's really, for me, it's the first one that I really remember that I actually still have. It's the one with Doc Ock on it.
Oh, number 3.
I think it's maybe it's 17. Actually, I think it's 17. Maybe I can't remember. But that's my favorite because that's the one I still have it. And I have Stan and my uncle both signed it. So that's something that that's one of my favorite covers. That one.
This one has 3 of my favorite things going on with it. Hulk is my second favorite hero. So Hulk's in this image, in this issue, and the first appearance of the Green Goblin. I mean, come on. I mean, this is such a classic issue.
Yeah.
I've got some more, and this panel as a kid. Yeah. Oh, forget about it, man. Yeah. Forget about it.
Yeah, look at that.
Oh, just love it. Look, just absolutely beautiful. And we've got some more here, and this is from Amazing Fantasy 15. Yeah. One thing I noticed, a couple things on this panel, the spider's blue on the back, which was different. He changed that up a little bit, or maybe the colorist did. I don't know. The thwip is gone, and there's a Wizard.
Yeah.
And he put eyeballs on him.
Oh, that was his to really emphasize that he was like, oh my gosh, am I seeing this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think currently, and even in the movies, they make his eyelids close now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see that. And I noticed on this last shot of the first issue, because when Stan and Steve did this, they probably didn't know that they were going to write a second Spider-Man story. And on your uncle's last issue, Spider-Man is walking away also. His back is turned. He's walking up the steps. So it's kind of like the perfect bookend, I think, of his run. So I just found that so interesting.
Yeah.
And refresh me, aren't those Amazing Fantasy 15s in the Smithsonian? Those pages? Yeah. And and by an anonymous donor, some anonymous donor, and people think it's your uncle. Do you think your uncle donated them?
Okay, I'm going to let this out. He gave them to me, and I donated them.
Oh, you're the guy.
There,
you heard it. We have an exclusive. You're the guy, huh?
That's right. Not.
Did you say not? I thought it was you. Man, I you got me good on the fish hook. Oh, Bruce, Library of Congress, or where the
Library
pages are.
Yeah, so Smithsonian. Yeah.
So comic book gossip pages. He is not the anonymous donor.
No.
Let's reiterate this.
Don't take that little snippet in.
They're going to cut this clip if you aren't careful, Mark.
It'll be everywhere.
Oh man. Bruce says that the colorist messed up on the color of the spider on the back. And he also says Steve inked that cover heavily, changing the Spidey Kirby as he was, never got Spidey right. I love Kirby too, but I agree. Him drawing Spider-Man, I don't think worked. What's your opinion on that, Mark? On Kirby's Spider-Man?
No comment. I mean, I don't really, okay. I think in your one of your emails to me or something, you said, "Hey, we're going to talk about Spider-Man and the early issues." Look, you got to understand, he was my uncle. I wasn't, I didn't really follow Spider-Man. I'm not. I couldn't even tell you what issues this is my favorite issue, because I don't even know what number it was. I'm not. I'm not a comic aficionado or a historian. So, I mean, I only know what I know and what we talked about, he and I talked about.
Right. Now, JL, I told you, don't write the bleeding cool and tell him that Mark is the anonymous donor. I'm telling you, he's not. It was a joke. Watch, JL's going to admit that he's the anonymous donor.
Okay, good. Cover for me.
One thing your uncle did that I love, and they still do to this day, is the multiple images of Spider-Man bouncing around to show speed. I love that, and the artists still do it. I mean, just look at that art. So amazing. Beautiful. So beautiful. Let's see what else we got. There you go. There's your Doc Ock issue that you love.
Yeah.
Just batting him around. And is this the one at what? I forget what issue it is, but Stan wrote, what was it? Peter Palmer instead of Peter Parker. I don't have that panel up, but one of these he did.
One of those.
And your uncle trying to explain how the lenses work, trying to put some science into it. I just looked at these over so many times in Marvel Tales about the behind the scene stuff.
Yeah, well, that was the scientist behind him and the mechanic. You know, he was very, I mean, he had a chemistry set and he loved, mechanical things. He could figure things out, building those wood airplanes he did, as a, high schooler. So he really put his thought into this stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. Oh, Peter, here we go. Oliver, Peter Parker was called Peter Palmer in Amazing Spider-Man #1. There you go. Thank you, Oliver. I couldn't think of the issue that happened. Yeah, he wanted to show how this stuff worked in real life to make this kid relatable and the everyman. So I always thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
What else we got? We got some original art. Love this panel. Look at the little web, the end for now. Just absolutely beautiful.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And one of the most famous scenes.
Classic.
The lifting of the heavy stuff. And on the show, we call this, and I think your uncle invented it, the floating heads of guilt.
I like it.
The floating heads of guilt. We got Aunt May floating here. We got Ben. So many times those floating heads of guilt are always around. And I don't know where I read it over the years, but your uncle started with small little panels, got bigger with the more strength he got until we got here. And then he did a full page. And when your uncle did a full page, man, he meant it. It was a storytelling reason. Talk about that. So many artists currently use a full page for nothing happens. He saved it.
Oh, he was a master of panel layout.
Yeah. He saved it. He used it when it needed it. And that one of the most iconic scenes in Spider-Man history right here. So did he ever talk about this panel at all? I mean, this sequence?
You know what? Okay. I wish I knew what I knew now, 15, 20 years ago when we were writing, because he and I, and in fact, what started it is I remember being a late teenager. I was maybe it was my second year in college, and sitting in my kitchen table. And this really set the path of our relationship. And I was complaining. I mean, long hair, braids. I'm a hippie, and I was complaining about, he's sitting there and he and I are talking, and I'm complaining about some war or some worldwide travesty that was going on. I'm just, being your classical, hippie complainer. And he looks at me just super calm. We're just chatting. And he says, "So what are you doing about that?" I was like, nothing.
Like, what do you need to bitch, isn't it? It's hard to make a change.
Like nothing. And he said, then you actually have no right to complain about it. Because if you're not doing something about something, then you have no right to, have some, just complaining attitude about it. So that kind of, those little things is what sort of stuck with me. And from that point forward, he became more of a sort of a guru to me. Like it was so had nothing to do with comics. If he didn't do anything in comics, I still would have had this relationship with him. Because so he ended up being a bit of a somebody who I really looked up to is his ethic level, his integrity level. And a lot of our conversations were more philosophical, but of course I'm always throwing in. And when I got back into comics, going to conventions, I, would say, yeah, I was just talking to Jack Kirby and he says, hey, pass on, do you ever get a girlfriend or something? So I started to get more involved in what he was doing, but I kind of wish I could, had I known what I know now, I probably would have asked them specific questions, because I know it was a burning question that never got answered.
And he probably would have opened up to you more than a stranger reporter, because he often turned interviews down. I mean, did he ever talk about why he did that?
He just didn't care.
He didn't care.
It wasn't important to him, because what was important to him is what he was doing.
Yeah.
And he felt like, it's almost like he would say to you, do you really care what, Bob somebody thinks about your show? Is that going to alter your show? Right. Is that going to alter your next show? It's like, well, if you stand on your own 2 feet, then do what you're doing, and it shouldn't matter what someone else thinks. Right. So he definitely had that kind of attitude.
We've got a couple of comments about this classic image. Bruce says, this is the best sequence in any comic ever. It's up there, man. It's up there. Yeah. Gabriel says the floating heads of guilt and the giant Spider-Man on the background of the city. 2 classics. Yes, I agree. 2 classic. Bruce also says Steve also had an all or nothing policy. If he gave one person an interview and an autograph, he would feel compelled to do it for all. Yeah, I've seen that. We were talking a bit about you wrote letters to him. Talk about that. What year did that start? Like when you moved out, probably.
No, because when I moved out of Johnstown, of course, I would see him until I moved out in around 84. Okay. So I moved to Phoenix in 84. And then when I did that, my then girlfriend ended up moving out 6 months later. So at that point, within the next year, we were married. Within the next year, we had our first kid, we had Alina. I'm starting a new job. We're looking for a place to live. I mean, I was so immersed in my own life that I didn't really reconnect up with him. And it really wasn't until I moved to Los Angeles in 91 that I really started to write back and forth. And I think probably what the catalyst is I had moved here and I was shopping, and I noticed I was doing some grocery shopping with my wife. I noticed across the street there was a yard sale, and they had some comic boxes there. And I was like, oh man, I want to go just check out some comics. It was just sort of like, hey, I should see what's there. And I started talking to the guy, and he found out who I was, and he was like, you're Steve Ditko's nephew? It's like, oh yeah. It's like, I got to show you something. So he takes me down in his basement, and I guess he had a comic store, and he had 2 giant trunks full of comics. And he said, I'll sell you these for $200 just because of who you are. And I was like, wow. Yeah, I'm in. So I ended up that actually started me buying comics and going to comic conventions. And that's when as we were writing back and forth, I probably started to write more about comics. And so that was probably, I didn't really connect back up with him until about 91. And then we wrote from then on.
Right. Was it like once a month, once every other week, or how often were you guys talking back and forth?
It would vary. Sometimes it would be every couple months when we were talking about the movies and stuff in the mid 2006, 2007. We were probably writing, every week back and forth,
right,
for a period.
He also wrote to his fans. There's a whole Steve Ditko Facebook group called Steve Ditko Letters, and I love reading. Oh, there. Thank you, Bruce, for sharing our broadcast right here. We've got, like one person says right here in our comments section, he always signed his letters, so you got his autograph that way. That's what they said. But he wrote, like, this is from 2013. This is from 2019. He liked to write a letter, didn't he? I mean, that's a lost art anymore.
Yep. Yeah, and he loved to just write. It would used to be on like a tracing paper and pencil. And then he kind of moved to just regular paper. But yeah, that's the way he stayed in touch. That's kind of an old school thing. You wrote letters. He was in the military. He wrote letters. He's you know, the old school, there were no emails, all that stuff. So it was writing letters, and he
Yep.
held on to that tradition, and he loved doing that. He was able to digest the thought, you know, and then respond appropriately.
Wow. Did he ever talk about how much mail he got? Because I can just imagine once because I regret not writing him a letter, and I got close to it. I just never had it happen. And I imagine once the internet came about and his address wasn't private, people could write him a letter, and obviously they did.
Yep.
So do you know how much mail he got, or was he always doing stuff?
Well, when we went to his studio, because he got most of his mail direct to his studio, we went to his studio. He passed away in the end of June, so he hadn't been to his studio because he ended up going to the hospital in like around mid-May. So I don't think he was in the studio through the month end of May and June. And then he passed away, and then we went out there. I think it was maybe near the end of August. But when we got there, we couldn't just open the door because the mail slot was, about, 24 inches or so, 18 inches, from the door. And it was so packed with mail that we couldn't, just shove and get. So in fact, I have those letters. I've been meaning to write. I want to write back with them and send them something, but there were hundreds of letters just in that span of a couple months. I kind of think that he probably wrote, 500 to 1,000 letters a year. I'll bet. Wouldn't surprise me.
Did he know he was loved by so many of us? I mean, did he know it?
Okay. Knowing and really acknowledging that, it's almost like someone giving you this compliment that is so over the top that you go, okay,
you're blowing smoke. Yeah.
It's kind of like, it's not that it's not true. It's just like, Brad, I got to tell you, you are the most amazing interviewer. Your show is like, the top of all shows, and you just go, thanks. I appreciate.
Actually, we can cut that piece, and I'll send it to Bleeding Cool, and I'm endorsed by the Ditko family. There you go.
But so it was really just you have your own reality check. It's just like, okay, I appreciate it.
Yeah. But if you get that many letters and you got to push the door through, he had to know he was loved.
I know.
But I mean, you can't deny that much fandom.
He wasn't stupid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Bruce says, ask Matt about the Ditko letters part of the exhibit. So we're going to have letters at the exhibit?
Yeah, our goal is, I've reached out a couple of times, and I've had some folks send me copies of their letters. Steve's replies to their letters. So we're going to try to kind of plaster a wall and make a big collage of all these letters that people can just come up and read as responses. Because that was a big part of who he was to fans, because he didn't do the conventions and such. So we want to share that for sure.
Did he ever talk about why he did some conventions, I think, in the early 60s? Did he ever talk about why he didn't, again, just looking forward? Mark, is that why he never did conventions?
Well, that one, if you read that book, what is it, that Bernie Bubness put out? I kind of have made a note of that. It's the 1964 New York Comic Con, the true story behind the world's first comic convention by Bernie Bubness. So that was the one that my uncle was kind of pivotal in helping put together or making sure that it actually happened. He was the celeb, at that one. But it was just a turnoff for him, because I'll tell you, and this is where I think my understanding of the family, I think if it would have been my dad would have went, I'm done with this, man. This is not for me. I want to just do my job. I love what I love. And this is just too much. It's just too much. We're not, I would say the Ditkos, although the next generation, my generation, we're a little bit different, is my dad, my aunt, my Uncle Steve, my grandparents. They weren't celebrity types.
Right.
You know, they were just hard workers.
Right.
I don't mind the, you know, putting something out there and being a spokesman for, you know, my uncle, because I think he deserved it. But his basic nature, my family basic nature, is to not necessarily do that.
Yeah. Talk a bit about, he often talked about he didn't like to look in the past. And I don't envy you in the fact that I would want to honor my uncle too. I mean, what would Uncle Steve think of the celebration, like the exhibit coming up, the honoring him after he's passed? What he would probably not like it, do you think? Or what's your thoughts on that?
Oh, he'd hate it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt. You
Yeah.
know, but you know what? It's funny you asked me that, because I thought about asking you that. If he was your uncle, knowing
Yes.
what you know of him, would you do it?
Yes, I would, because it's a hard one. It's a really hard. It's a really hard one.
Right.
It's a yin and a yang.
Yep.
Do I honor an amazing man, or do I go by his wishes? And I don't. Like I said, Mark, I don't know him, and I don't think he would want to be forgotten. And
I don't think he would care.
really,
Honestly, don't think he'd care.
he would. Well, he was
People
so
get forgotten
loved.
all the time. People get forgotten all the time.
That's
And
true.
so to him, it was just like, I don't think it was a problem. But you know what? So let me read you this other thing he wrote that I that I do think about. And he talks about, because he always talks about his own privacy, you know?
Right.
So there was this one time he wrote me and he said, where's it at? Because that's a touchy one. And, you know, on the forums, you know, the Facebook and stuff, I'll say I could get thrashed pretty good about doing something like this.
Right.
When the other people's opinion, they would not agree, because they would say, if he didn't want to, you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, but you're the family. I mean, you can honor your family how you want. It's your family. So, I mean, and hell with the internet trolls, you know, hell with them. You're the family and you decide. So you do what you want. I think it's awesome.
Let me find this one quote. I do want to kind of just read this one thing where he talks about, he says, every person should value his privacy, and it is important to understand what is meant by privacy. Claims about most things regarding me have come not from me, but from others who believe they are qualified to speak for me or about me. Their speaking about me is supposed to prove that they know what they are talking about. Well, from the family perspective, what we looked at was, we're only saying what we know. We're not, there's no speculation involved. In fact, usually if I'm speculating, you know, you say, oh, do you think he really something? I was like, I don't know.
I don't know. My best guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So I could speculate based on what I know of the family and him and what he wrote, and kind of put things together. But most of what we're doing is just like this Bottle Works show. It's going to show memorabilia and stuff that he did. You know, we're not saying something that's, you know, we're not doing this for the money, for one, you know, and we're just trying to get people to understand who he actually was.
Right.
I was talking to Kevin Feige after the last Spider-Man premiere. I got invited to that, and I was talking to him, and he asked me what I thought about the tribute at the end of the movie, and I was like, you know,
you mean the lifting of the stuff?
No, the tribute at the end. He's put like Steve Ditko and Stan Lee put their signatures, and he kind of had a little tribute to them. And I was like, you know, okay. And he said, well, he didn't have any material. And I was like, well, okay, if you need material, let me know. But we're trying to get more material out there. And he said he really thinks he said you should be doing that, because if you don't, 10 years from now, the only thing that will be left is a caricature of who he was.
Yes, I agree.
And you
100%.
know what that caricature will be? It
will be the Howard Hughes, the introvert that never talked to anybody, just stayed in his studio. And I'm glad the family, you guys are letting us know what he was like as a guy, as a dude.
Well, just the very first meeting that I had with your dad, Mark, that was the one thing he said to me. And honestly, I think our conversation, you know, that we had is why this has moved forward the way it has. But he said to me, I'm glad you're not looking to add to this speculation. He said, we'd like people to know who he was not who they thought he was. That was
Exactly.
important.
Yep.
Yeah. And Jeff in comment says, better that the family does this than others who simply want to capitalize on his contributions. I agree with that. I agree with that. And he also says he's glad that his hometown is celebrating him. So there you go. The Ditko family's hard work with the Johnstown author for a book. Yeah, we were going to talk about that, Bruce. That's a perfect segue. You guys are wanting to put a book together as a family, Mark. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so this is something that, when my uncle passed away, I flew out to Johnstown, to help my younger brother, Pat, who was there, Patrick, and my dad kind of sort out, what was going on. We were going to go out to New York and get his stuff. But probably within a day or so, we were outside, just kind of chit-chatting. And my dad said, he just kind of just spit it out. He said, we should do a book called Steve Ditko, the Man. And who he was as a brother, as a son, as an uncle, just not industry stuff, but just who he was as a person. And so that's kind of where this has gone, where we have, somebody, Bob Jasonic from Johnstown. He's, been interviewing everybody. He's sort of formulated the book. The draft is done.
Wow.
I just read it a couple weekends ago and gave him, him my comments. So yeah, that is something that is fully in the works and being compiled right now, probably heading towards a 2022 next year release.
Very cool. Yeah. That'll be great to see. One book I think would be perfect, in addition to one you're talking about, is printing all those letters. Go to that Facebook group, find the letters, and just make a letters from Ditko book. I think that would be such a nice read.
Well, okay. I got to throw this in. I'm still okay. I have my own business, but there's, to me, a legal side on the whole copyright thing, and it's just kind of gets sort of legalese. But there's something that I still have to understand about, because I had heard rumor that somebody was going to do that, but I don't understand the legalities of doing that, because to me, what I had heard, and I don't know, I have to consult a lawyer or something, is that the person who wrote the letter has ownership of that letter and not necessarily publishing rights. So from what I understand, all of those letters, the ability to publish them is owned by the Ditko estate.
Oh, cool.
Not necessarily an individual who could just collect them all up and publish them. So I've heard rumors that somebody was going to do that. We haven't really, as a family, pursued doing that or not doing that. I'm just trying to understand the legalities of doing that right now. But I agree, because I belong to that page, that's Steve Ditko's letters. I have not only the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages that he wrote me, that we wrote back and forth, but I have others, that have sent me their letters. That has given me, just amplified my insight into who he was.
Right. And sign me and Matt up. We're going to buy that book if you put both books, if you put them out.
I'll pre-order it tonight.
Yeah. Give me the Amazon link. Come on, Mark. One thing I've often wondered about your uncle, Stanley was such an extrovert, such a salesman, so would not turn an interview down. And your uncle is almost so much different than him. Stanley looked back at everything, and what do you think? I don't even know what the question is. Is it like a yin and a yang of those two? They're just so completely opposite, but they work like chocolate and peanut butter and made a beautiful Reese's Pieces. I mean, what's your thoughts on the relationship between those two men?
Well, I think you kind of said it. It was a perfect storm of two people who kind of came together. My uncle was always, and I mean, he always pushed division of labor. It's a division of labor. You have your job, you have your job, you have your job, and that's what gets that product out. He had his role, and he was a pro at his role. And Stan, did he care about what Stan was necessarily doing? No, he probably just cared that he had a job and a paycheck and, consistent work. And Stan did his job, I'll say, good, in a sense that he was a promoter. He was a showman. He was out there. He was pounding the streets, whatever, the sort of the anti-Stanites, say, my opinion is that at that time, at that moment, it was a perfect storm. Jack and Stan and my uncle and everybody else that was there just created something that I don't know if that dynamic has existed since. So is it because they were polar opposite that it worked? Was it a yin and a yang thing? I don't know. My uncle and Jack were insanely good artists and creators. And Stan was pounding the streets and preaching the word. It worked.
Your uncle did. I've got a picture of it. With Robin Snyder put out an essay called "Why I Quit SM, Spider-Man, and Marvel," and I read it recently. And he talks a bit about how at some point in the relationship with Stan, when Marvel was getting so big, he wouldn't talk to Steve. He would drop the art off, and he would hand it to Saul. I think Blasky. I think. Yeah. And Saul was the middleman between Steve and Stan. And your uncle, I wondered why that relationship changed, according to his words in this article. And he eventually said, well, if he's not coming out of his office after I quit, I'm just done. I mean, what's your thoughts on this article he wrote, Mark?
Well, I was 4 and it was a take your nephew to work day. And I happened to go to work with him that day. So
when Saul took the art?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was crazy. No, I mean, this is really where, look, this is so far beyond, where my head is at. But that doesn't mean that I don't have I can't draw my own conclusions from everything that I know.
Yeah.
Feel free. But what was the question?
What changed about the relationship? Because after he quit, he also put out an image. I've got this image up. Let me pull it. There was a bit of in the late 90s.
Oh, yeah.
There was a who is the co-creator, who is the creator, and Stan said he hated to admit it, but Steve is the co-creator. And then in a rebuttal in 1999, Steve put this out. It says, who is the creator? Who is the co-creator?
Okay. So let me just rewind the whole way back, I think, into the 60s. And this is kind of just my spin for what it's worth. And it's
no doubt.
Michael would say, that and a nickel will maybe get you a cup of coffee. But clearly something had happened.
Yeah.
Because it was not business as usual. There was some agreement, at some point there was a seeing eye to eye that no longer existed.
Yeah.
So what was that? The speculation is that it was royalties or a piece of the pie or something. In my opinion, that is what it was, but that's my opinion. And I've talked to others that kind of substantiated that in later years. But then why did I quit Marvel? He pretty much said, no, that really wasn't it. But I don't know. At some point, maybe I would get my arm twisted and kind of come out with a little bit stronger opinion or something on that, because I do have my own opinion. But all I can say is I think clearly something happened that disrupted my uncle. Hey, I've worked jobs to where something happened that it made me so unhappy that I just quit and had no place to go. I have quit multiple jobs with nowhere to go except the street because it just things weren't working anymore.
Yeah.
And at that point, he didn't see some $1 billion future, not that he was looking at that, but $1 billion future in Spider-Man or Doctor Strange. So it was, we look back at it in hindsight and go, that was insane. How could someone walk away from that? Well, come on, look, you see what it is now. You didn't see what it was then.
You're right. So, and it's the question that's been asked before: what broke the Beatles up? What broke Stan and Steve up? I mean, it's the comic book equivalent of the Beatle breakup.
Yep.
So, and we will never know because both men have passed. And Stan had a horrible memory, as it's on record. So he probably doesn't know anymore, or didn't know. He also did. He wrote an article talking about Jack Kirby's idea of Spider-Man versus what Steve brought to the table. He drew this because no one has seen the alleged 5 pages that Kirby drew of Spider-Man. And this is your uncle's memory of what it looked like, I think.
I just read something recently,
and
I can't remember if it was something that someone else had posted in a letter or something that I read one of my letters where he said, if there was one thing I wish I would have saved those pages.
Your uncle said that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would love to see him. I mean, there's been rumors of there's a ray and a gun and the webbing came out of the gun. But I think I have, some kid, I don't know, not kid, but someone did this mock-up of what Kirby's Spider-Man allegedly looked like. Your uncle didn't put glasses on, so I don't know how accurate that is. Yeah. But that's night and day to what your uncle came up with on the right. So
and I think it was. And I have talked to my share of real the Kirby side. And I think there's still some, strong, desire there or to try to substantiate that he was a real creator of Spider-Man. Yeah. But you know what? I'm sorry for all Kirby fans, I can't go there. The reality is he came out with his imagery and his, Amazing Fantasy 15. It was what it was. He created, that aspect of his visuals. So, what went earlier, I think you could always go earlier. Hey, look at Arlen's presentations that he does on, other artists. He can always find just dozens of references from Twilight Zone to whatever, from Michelangelo, how there's the similarities of artistry. The reality is what is really new. It's just an amalgam of everything that He created it. He did. Right. He is the creator of that imagery. But I'm a Ditko, so I'd probably say that.
Did Uncle Steve ever talk about John Romita, who replaced him on the title?
No, I wish this is another one. I wish I would have written him. I've met John multiple times, and I've had conversations with John. I love John, but it was something I never really thought about. Even asking him because I wasn't thinking, about that.
Yeah. I've never heard anything bad about the two of them fighting or anything like that. I mean, I think there was mutual respect on both of them.
Yep. So, John loved what, my Uncle Steve did. And we had fantastic conversations and he always welcomed me with open arms.
Yeah. Let's see. Co-creator. Any thoughts on what we were talking about of why he didn't like that term co-creator?
Where in what reference? Because I think he generally did see himself as a co-creator, where Stan was the one that always was, hey, creator, I'm the creator.
Right.
He did see it as co-creator.
That's true. I wonder why Stan did not. I think he thought if I came up with the idea, but comics are a visual medium as much as a prose. So it's 50-50 almost.
You know what? That to me is an interesting point that I've just from an outsider and now getting more immersed in this is that I see this not a battle, but a kind of almost a tug of war sometimes between who's the creator, between the writer and the artist. But I've also known and talked with other writers who write at a granular level where they're describing something in so much detail that, oh my gosh, I mean, I'm just taking those words and making a picture out of it. So I think in the case of obviously Doctor Strange is a different thing, but Spider-Man, I think a lot of those, especially you take a look at the all the villains that he created that came out of he created that. I don't care what word you say. To me, he is the creator of that. A word doesn't mean anything. I'm also an inventor. So I could come up with a crazy name for an invention and maybe know what it is, but that doesn't make me an inventor if someone really comes up with the mechanics and all that stuff. So they are co-creators. And why Stan took that because he was a showman and I don't know. He just felt like that was a way for him to own all that and pitch it.
Right. Talk about the last time you talked to him. He passed away June 29th, 2018. When was the last time you talked to your uncle?
Well, the last time I actually saw him, I posted that. You scrolled past it on the letters. I have it on my Facebook. I run the Steve Ditko's World group, but it's pinned to the top of the Steve Ditko World group. That was a video that my daughter shot the last time that I was in Johnstown when I saw him. So that was the last time we were together.
Oh, I think, is it that home movie thing?
Yeah.
That home movie video? Okay, here, I'll pull that up one more time. Let me remove this.
Yeah, and that really, to me, I love that imagery because it kind of shows you how lighthearted he was and how, friendly he was. And I remember going to the door, I mean,
right there. There you go. There you are, right there on the right.
Yeah.
And you remember what you guys were talking about there?
No, somebody asked me. I mean, we talked about everything from rights to bees and being stung. I mean, on and on and on. We would just talk about everything. But even that, that was 2005 or somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm walking up to the door and he hides. He hides, and I come in the door and he jumps out at me.
Oh wow!
To try to. That's my uncle. That's my uncle being kind of like one of the kids.
And he's what, in his late 70s, early 80s, jumping out at you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just being a jokester,
Yeah. That's so cool. That was 2005. Yeah. Did you continue letters after that? I mean, up till 20s. What was the year? 2017 is
what? I don't remember the last time. I have to dig out my letters. I don't remember the last time. We would always send, Christmas cards or something like that, or birthday. I'd send him stuff for his birthday, but I don't remember the last time we actually wrote, a lengthier letter.
Right. I have a similar case. My grandfather passed away a couple years ago, and I don't remember the last conversation. They just kind of all blend together, don't they? Yeah. And
that's why I only remember the time that I was there, the last time I saw him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fans in the comment section, we're getting ready to wrap it up a little bit. If you guys want to ask some questions to Mark or Matt or me, feel free. We'll pop them up before we wrap it up. I haven't been hitting the comments up as much as I can. Here's one from Alex. Mark, what's your opinion of the Sam Raimi films? He's reportedly a huge fan of the early Lee Ditko years of Spidey.
Well, okay. If anybody can get me a connection to Sam Raimi, because he's doing, isn't he doing the?
He's Doctor Strange too.
So I want to talk to Sam. I want to chat with him. But
me too.
So all I could say is, from sort of a comment from my uncle, is, look, if you're going to do a tribute to him, make it a real tribute. If you're going to put his name embedded in the movie, then make it something honorable and worthy, of an actual creator, co-creator. So that's all that I would say. I love all the movies. Just the fact that they, are doing those. I love Tom Holland on those his latest one stuff though.
But I can't stand he's a sidekick. Or he's Iron Man Jr. And I hated the lifting scene that your uncle did so beautifully. And Uncle Ben and Aunt May are nowhere in there. He's just talking about Tony. I hate that.
Yeah, they definitely didn't play that up like they could have. Yeah. But
they don't even mention Uncle Ben.
I'm kind of a fan of the Marvel Universe anyway, the movies that Kevin is doing. So I'm not as serious as maybe some other fans are. Yeah. I'm just, more on the enjoyment, entertainment side. I think it's entertaining.
Right. Alex also wants to know if your uncle ever talked about the Chameleon.
I don't recall ever talking to him about the Chameleon. No.
Didymus wants to know, was there any spider villains that your uncle created by himself besides the Looter? You talked about he pretty much designed all of them. I mean, was the Looter just totally Ditko? Did he come up with the idea of the name and everything, or what was that?
Don't know. Okay. You know what? At that point in time when he was plotting everything,
right?
He's the one that had the map of probably the track of where things are going and where things, who's who. I don't know what involvement Stan had in any of that stuff. Right. I would probably put the lion's share of the the creative force on my uncle and on all of those characters.
Yeah. Jeff says that Ringo broke up Steve and Stan. So I think you're getting it confused, Jeff.
Yeah. It's maybe plausible. Yeah. Something to look into.
Let's see what else we got. JL says, please make a virtual visit of the exhibition for your foreign friends. Yes, we're talking with Bruce, and he's going to bring his cell phone, and I'll connect Bruce just like we're doing now with these gentlemen, and we'll get you a visual tour. I think that would be cool to get a tour. Maybe JL is the one, but up here there was one from Brazil that said, yeah, here it is. No, Gabriel said, it's a shame that I can't go to the exhibit. I live in Brazil, but it's great that this is happening. So that's awesome, Gabriel. We'll get you a virtual tour.
So Matt, can we take this on the road? Can you package this up and we can get some funding and take it on the road?
I'm up for just about anything. So
I mean, we should take it down to at least the San Diego or some of the other.
We'll stop in the Midwest and Missouri where I am, please.
Yeah, I mean, we should take it on tour.
There you go.
Totally down with that.
Yeah, Matt, do you have a big truck?
We'll figure something
out. Scott says, will there ever be any releases of Steve's earlier Marvel art?
I have a desire, and we'll see where that goes.
Right. You know, there was a Jonathan Ross did a thing about Ditko, 15 years ago, and he tried to interview him and go. He went up, he knocked on the door on that nameplate right behind your head, and he wouldn't do an interview. But someone, I don't know if it was Jonathan Ross or someone else, had knocked on your uncle's door, said that he saw a lot of Marvel art around. So did you ever hear if he drew Spider-Man again or Doctor Strange again, or just did he write stories about these guys? Or
no, what that was in reference to was the artwork that he had gotten back, and that he had artwork, around. That's really what that was referenced. Okay. He wasn't continuing to do that. I mean, he was working on his other stuff at, whatever his active job paying gig was, is what he was working on.
So there was never a lost Spider-Man story that we never saw. So that would
not be that awesome. I'm aware of.
There was I read in the maybe early 90s when the 2099 book came about. That's Marvel in the future. Mm-hmm. Steve and Stan got together, maybe possibly the last time in person. And we're thinking about doing a collaboration with the Ravage book. And of all the heroes to do, Ravage was not the one for those two. But how cool would it have been if they would have done a Spider-Man of the future? I think that would have been so cool.
Yeah, I heard about that meeting, that didn't really come, wasn't fruitful. Nothing really came out of it. But I did hear about that meeting, and they were cordial and, hugged each other, and but it just didn't gel in terms of what my uncle wanted to be doing at the time.
Yep. Bruce is wanting to know about some of the hints of things we'll see from the family at the exhibit.
Honestly, I don't know, because my dad is the one that's and Patrick are the ones that have all of his stuff. Mm-hmm. The one thing that we're doing is I have his library, his whole library. So that's what's behind me and over to my side here. So I'm going to take photos of every shelf of all these books, and we're going to reconstruct it. So we're not going to haul the books back there, but we're going to reconstruct it somewhere on the wall, right, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool.
So that's one thing. But otherwise, Matt may know more, but I don't know what my dad and Patrick have up their sleeve as far as what they're going to take from what they have and what's going to be in the show.
Hopefully there's lots of pictures coming up, Matt.
I think there's a lot of that is honestly still kind of up in the air, because it's hard for them to decide what to show and what not to show, so I think there's still a lot of debate going on inside the family, but I do know that there's going to be things that nobody's seen before.
That'll be so cool. Bruce also has a question for Matt. How can fans participate remotely if they're not able to attend the exhibit, like buying items and viewing it?
Well, like you talked about doing it on your show here with a walking interview, and
Yeah.
hadn't actually discussed it with Mark yet, but I'm hoping we can do a similar type of walkthrough with him, maybe talking about the pieces in the exhibit. So we'll make everything that we can available.
Yeah.
There's some discussion of a catalog. I think we're probably more likely to make a catalog of the inspired exhibit as opposed to the actual main exhibit, just because of the rights to the images and such. But
right. How many?
we're gonna do everything.
But on the inspired artwork, that's going to be able to. You're going to do online auction too on that, right?
Yes.
It's not just going to be there in person. It's going to be online auction.
Yeah, on September 11th, which is the day of the mini-con, that's the last day of the exhibit. So at that point, we're gonna have a live auction, but it'll be you'll be able to join in online as well.
Oh, that's cool. Have you gotten any of the art in house yet, or are they still working on it?
I have a couple pieces in hand. Yeah.
Nice. That would be so cool to go to the mailbox. Oop, got something cool today.
I geek out. As much work as it's been to put all this together, I geek out every single day, man. It's great.
Make a show you want to see. It sounds like, Matt, you're doing it.
Absolutely.
Eric says, Mark, thanks for an awesome interview. Did your uncle ever speak about his time doing horror books at Warren Comics?
I asked them, the only thing I can remember, and again, I got to go through my letters at some point. I don't know, maybe at some point I publish my letters and our exchange, because that's be a pretty hefty volume. But I asked them about his wash work, which I just absolutely loved his wash work. So, and he was just saying, he made some comments about his wash work, that it was just him experimenting with new techniques that he loved to do. I can't remember anything really beyond that.
Yeah. Los Comex TV. Nice to see Matt. He's been a faceless email correspondent for the last few weeks. Looking forward to visiting Johnstown in September. He has a question. Says, have they done a show this big at Bottle Works before, Matt?
Oh, that's, I guess, hard to put into perspective. We celebrate a lot of local artists and we have a lot of big exhibitions. But for me personally, there hasn't been one bigger, just because of my personal connection to Steve's work. But we do I would say a lot of important work.
Yeah. Bruce also says, Mark, thank you and your family for allowing us to see the man side of Steve. I would agree. JL, who is sending 2 clips to Bleeding Cool. One that the Ditko family loves the crawl space. And 2, he is not the secret donor as Amazing Fantasy 15, but he's working on his Ditko inspired drawing, and it's stressful. Yeah, man. I would imagine.
Me too, and I've done like 3 of them because I can't, you know what I mean? It's
Oh, Matt, you're an artist too? I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, and I finish a piece and then I'm like, yeah, I like it, but it's just not enough, like I keep going back to the drawing board.
Hey, and I'll let out that I'm actually working on something too.
Oh,
just
awesome.
A panel from a Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. So that's great.
Well, I don't have it done, so I didn't. We'll see if I actually get it done. But yeah, I've been working on it.
That'll be awesome. The Ditko Spider-Man connection continues. I love that. Eric says, I love those books and his horror work. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
JL says, thanks for the show. It was very nice. I've seen Mark's artwork and he loves it. We have another question. Let's see. Let me share the screen real quick of the schedule of events. So this question, this person goes, hey, I'm from Pennsylvania, close to Johnstown. What's going on? It sounds awesome. Luke. All right. Well, Luke, there's an exhibit. You're an hour and a half late to the interview, but bro.
Check out the Facebook page and the website. It's all there.
Yes, and hit rewind on this video. You can hear all about the celebration Steve Ditko is starting next month in his hometown, starting July 15th through September 11th at Bottle Works. It's going to be a great show. On the crawl space, we'll give you a walking tour with Bruce, and it'll be a great time. Gentlemen, I appreciate your time. Mark, thank you for your time. I've wanted to so much about your uncle, and it's nice to learn the man, like Bruce said, instead of the rumors.
Yeah.
So, gentlemen, thank you so much. And let me put the Patreon members up here, and that is a wrap.